Karoline Leavitt mocked Jasmine Crockett's education on live TV, thinking she'd fluster her. But what happened next turned the entire room on its head and stunned the internet. You know it's cute how some folks think being loud equals being smart, Leavitt said smoothly, her tone sharp and practiced, followed by a smirk aimed not just at Crockett but at the cameras in the audience, ready to flood social media. It was a live national broadcast, a Friday night special from a studio in Des Moines, Iowa, covering education, race, and politics, 3 words that never mixed quietly. 5 panelists, 1 moderator, and 2 women representing polar opposites of America's divide sat poised. Yet Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. The air was already tense, but that jab shifted something. Whether you were in the room or watching from home, you felt it, like someone had just dared the wrong person at the wrong time. Jasmine leaned back slightly, eyes steady on Karoline. She didn't grab the mic or clench her jaw. She just let the silence do the talking. The moderator, sensing tension, tried to move things along, but Jasmine wasn't done. Moments like that don't just happen. They build over time, whispered behind closed doors, fueled by people smiling to your face while cutting you down with coded language. Tonight, that language was on full display, and the audience didn't gasp. They laughed. Not everyone, but enough. It wasn't loud. It was nervous, sharp, scattered. Karoline straightened up, liking the sound. But Jasmine stayed still. She'd heard that laugh her whole life. The clapback that would send headlines spinning was still brewing. But just 30 minutes earlier, the stage was buzzing with last-minute prep. Microphones checked, producers scrambling, lights flaring to life. Jasmine arrived calm and composed, dressed in an emerald blazer with minimal jewelry, ready to speak on what she knew best. Across the room, Karoline adjusted her curls, whispered to the makeup artist, barely glancing Jasmine's way. She didn't need to. Her body language said it all. I'm here to dominate, not to dialogue. It wasn't Jasmine's first time on live TV, but something about that night felt different. Maybe it was the energy in the room, or the way producers had framed it. 2 women, 1 table, different Americas. Jasmine had rolled her eyes at that tagline, but she still came, because she always shows up when it matters. Her father always told her, show up, even when it's uncomfortable, especially then. And here she was, showing up again, only to be mocked for it, for her education, her intelligence, her right to sit in that chair. Karoline's jab wasn't just personal. It was strategic, meant to diminish Jasmine, to reframe her not as a lawmaker or attorney, but as someone who didn't belong. Not really. But what happened next? No one in that studio, not Karoline, not the moderator, not even Jasmine herself, could have predicted. Because when you've spent your whole life preparing for a moment you didn't know was coming, it doesn't catch you off guard. It reveals who you are. In the too cold green room, Jasmine Crockett wrapped her hands around a sigh, lukewarm cup of coffee, glancing at the monitor showing rows of empty chairs under soft lights. The stage was set. The crew buzzed around, adjusting cables and testing audio levels. Jasmine took a steady, quiet breath. She'd done this before. Debates, panels, interviews. But this one felt different. Not because of the stakes, but because of the opponent. Karoline Leavitt had built her brand on 2 things, precision and provocation. She knew how to needle and how to smile while doing it. Jasmine had studied her tactics, not out of fear, but out of respect for the game. You don't walk into a storm pretending it's sunshine. Jasmine dressed with intention. A dark green blazer, white blouse, sleek gold earrings. Not flashy, not loud, just enough to say, I didn't come here to argue. I came here to be heard. She ran her finger across her notes one last time. Case, law, education statistics, examples of systemic bias. She knew she wouldn't need most of it. What mattered tonight wasn't just what she said, but how she carried it across the room. A producer handed Karoline a mic pack. Karoline didn't glance over, but her voice traveled. I just hope we don't turn this into a therapy session about feelings. Karoline chuckled, loud enough for the room to hear. Jasmine didn't respond. not because she missed it, but because she had already categorized the comment as low effort. Instead, she took a seat near the mirror, pulled out her phone, and opened a text thread with her older brother, Miles. "You got this. Be precise and breathe," he had texted earlier. She smiled. He always knew when she was overthinking. A knock on the door pulled her back into the moment. The stage manager stepped in, headset on. "5 minutes, y'all." Karoline stood immediately, adjusting her jacket like she was stepping onto a runway. Jasmine stood slower, taking one last look in the mirror. Her eyes were focused, but carried that familiar fatigue of someone who's always had to prove themselves twice as hard. She walked past Karoline without a word. No smile, no nod. Just forward. The hallway to the stage was narrow, and the murmur of the audience grew louder. Local folks, college students, political junkies, a few reporters. They were told to stay neutral, but audiences always picked a side long before the show began. As they reached the edge of the stage, Karoline leaned in, voice low. "Don't take it personal tonight," she said. "It's just politics," Karoline said. With a shrug, Jasmine turned to her. "You don't have to tell me how the game works," she replied. "I just play it differently." The moderator was already seated, papers in hand, eyes flicking between his notes and the countdown clock. Jasmine took her place, sitting tall and still, like the only tree in a field that had learned not to bend when the wind showed up. The lights dimmed, theme music played, and the red tally light blinked on the camera. They were live. The moderator welcomed the audience, introduced the panel, and outlined the topic: the intersection of public education and political bias. Karoline smiled like it was a photo op, while Jasmine adjusted her mic and waited. She didn't need the spotlight. She just needed the floor. Sometimes the most powerful person in the room isn't the one who talks first. It's the one who waits until the silence is impossible to ignore. The studio lights were brighter than expected, but Jasmine didn't squint. She kept her eyes forward, letting the shine bounce off her blazer like armor. Karoline sat diagonally, across from her, legs crossed, smiling like she knew something the rest didn't. The moderator cleared his throat. "Let's begin with a simple question. Is the public school system doing enough to prepare students for real-world success regardless of background?" Karoline jumped in first, almost too quickly. "Well, I think it's clear to anyone paying attention that public schools, especially in urban areas, are failing students," Karoline began, her voice crisp and polished. "We spend billions, but students can't read at grade level. And rather than address accountability, we keep blaming the system. It's about personal responsibility, not excuses." A few audience members nodded, but Jasmine sensed the setup. It wasn't just about schools. It was about framing failure as something tied to certain zip codes, certain faces. Jasmine paused, then leaned into her mic. "It's interesting how quickly we label something as failure when we don't understand the obstacles. Most of the students I've worked with didn't lack intelligence. They lacked opportunity. When systems are built without them in mind, the problem isn't effort, it's design." The tension rose, subtle but sharp. Karoline smiled, this time with an edge. "Sure, but you're a lawyer, right? You made it out, so why can't others do the same?" Jasmine tilted her head slightly. "I didn't make it out. I made it through, and that's a very different thing." There was a shift then, small but noticeable. A few people in the audience straightened in their seats, and the moderator leaned, sensing the heat. He moved to another panelist, a former principal from Arizona, but Karoline's hand shot up halfway. "If I can jump in real quick, because I think we're dancing around something. Let's be honest, some degrees just don't carry the same weight," Karoline said, her tone smooth but loaded. "And if you're going to sit at the table making decisions, people want to know you didn't just slide in because of a quota." It was sharp, wrapped in the language of merit, and the moderator didn't cut in, whether out of hesitation or curiosity was unclear. Jasmine stayed still, letting the words hang in the air like smoke. The audience shifted. Discomfort moved through the room. A young woman looked down at her lap, A man in the back whispered to his neighbor, but Jasmine remained silent. Another panelist tried to steer the conversation. If we're talking credentials, public trust is built on more than paper. It's about performance, too. Jasmine glanced at him, then calmly turned her eyes back to Karoline. Still no immediate response. Karoline sat back, looking pleased, arms crossed, scanning the room like someone used to applause for cutting deep with a smile. The moderator shuffled his papers. Representative Crockett, do you have a response before we move on? Jasmine nodded once, slowly. She leaned into the mic, voice calm and even, not about to let it slide, because some moments call for grace while others require clarity. Jasmine didn't blink, didn't smile, and didn't rush. She adjusted, her mic gently, like she was about to deliver a weather report, not respond to a jab. You know, Karoline, she began, there's a difference between confidence and condescension. One invites conversation, the other hides behind it. The room went still. I graduated magna cum laude from Prairie View A&M, earned my law degree from the University of Houston, passed the bar on my first try, and defended clients in underfunded courtrooms across Texas. Nothing was handed to me. I earned every room I walked into. She paused. And let me be clear. If you think a school's name defines someone's intelligence, you're not questioning education. You're questioning exposure. Silence followed, thick and telling. Karoline's smile slipped for just a second. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Jasmine never looked away. It's funny, she added, leaning back slightly, how folks underestimate you when they're afraid you might outwork them. And that was it. The line cut through the studio, like a silent thunderclap, sending a ripple of gasps through the audience. No yelling, no drama. Just that one sentence hanging heavy in the air. A college student started clapping hesitantly, then others joined in. Some stood, some quietly absorbed it. The flustered moderator tried to regain control, urging, "Let's keep this civil, everyone." But nothing unruly had happened. Jasmine hadn't insulted anyone. She'd met the challenge with honest truth meant to reveal, not wound. Karoline grabbed her water bottle, her hand moving too fast, trying to distract from her expression. She still hadn't responded. A quiet economist from St. Louis broke the tension, saying, "That was well said, Representative." Jasmine nodded. Slightly, not out of thanks, but acknowledgement. She didn't need approval, she knew her truth. Karoline finally spoke, her voice losing rhythm. Credentials are one thing, but results matter. Agreed, Jasmine replied smoothly. And tonight, the audience just learned who earned her seat at this table. The crowd reacted louder. The moderator raised a hand. Moving on to our next topic, but thank you both for your passion. Jasmine leaned back, not looking at Karoline again. The real impact had already been made. What made an impact wasn't just what she said, but how clearly it exposed everything that had just happened. When someone tries to diminish you and you stand firm without lashing out, that's not just strength, it's control. But the night wasn't over, and the room, still buzzing from her words, wasn't done with her yet. Even as the moderator tried to shift the conversation to federal funding gaps and teacher shortages, the energy stayed focused on Jasmine. She hadn't yelled or blamed anyone, yet in those brief seconds, she'd said more than some do in a lifetime. Clearing his throat, the moderator changed topics. Representative Crockett, how can state governments take a more active role in improving public education outcomes? Jasmine didn't respond immediately. She scanned the table, the moderator, other panelists, then Karoline, who suddenly seemed deeply interested in her notes. Returning to her calm, measured tone, Jasmine said, "When we talk about outcomes, we can't keep pretending everyone has the same starting line. You can't compare a student who walked 3 miles to a school without heat to one who had SAT prep built into their curriculum." A few in the audience nodded. One woman whispered, "Thank you." "It's not about pity or handouts," Jasmine added. "It's about acknowledgement, that's the baseline. You can't fix what you're too proud to admit is broken." She glanced briefly at the moderator. The state's role should be to level the playing field, not tip it further. But too often, decisions are made by people who've never walked the path they're shaping. That's why representation matters. Not just in race, but in real-life experience. Her voice stayed steady and clear. No shouting, no buzzwords, just honest truth. The moderator then turned to Karoline. Would you like to respond? Karoline adjusted her mic. I think it's dangerous to always frame America as divided between the privileged and the oppressed. That just breeds resentment. We should focus on what unites us. Right, Jasmine replied. But unity without honesty is just a cover-up. A quiet murmur rippled through the audience. Karoline looked annoyed. Well, I didn't come here to be lectured on struggle or to have mine diminished, Jasmine said calmly. The moderator leaned in, trying to calm things down. Let's bring this back to policy. But by then, the conversation had already moved far beyond policy. This was personal. Not just between Jasmine and Karoline, but for everyone watching who'd ever been overlooked, talked over, or judged before speaking. Finally, a panelist, a professor from Oregon, spoke up. It's easy to praise meritocracy when the ladder you climbed was already leaning against the right wall. What I respect about Representative Crockett's points is that they come from real experience, not emotion. Jasmine simply acknowledged him. No nod, no smile. Karoline crossed her arms and asked, So we're just going to pretend degrees from lesser-known schools equal Ivy League ones? Jasmine leaned in. We're done pretending brand names replace character, because I'd rather be taught by someone who values effort than by someone who feels superior because of a crest on their diploma. This time applause came quickly and sharply, spreading through the audience. The moderator didn't try to stop it. Karoline stayed silent, nothing left to say without sounding defeated or bitter. Jasmine knew winning the moment didn't always mean winning the story. After the cameras cut, what happened next was just as important. As the segment ended, the studio lights dimmed and a pre-taped commercial on Oklahoma school funding played. But the tension didn't fade. It shifted. Karoline was the first to rise, offering a quick thanks to the moderator before leaving the stage without once looking at Jasmine. Not during the polite post-show handshakes, not when producers asked for photos near the curtains. Jasmine stayed seated a moment longer, scanning the room. Not for applause, but for calm. She took a sip of water, then stood quietly. A young production assistant approached, quietly asking, You really smoked her? With a smile. Jasmine nodded softly, offering a quiet thanks and moving on. She knew this wasn't just a performance. It was a powerful release for everyone watching who needed to hear the truth. As she left the stage, a small, quiet crowd gathered around her, pulling her aside with hushed voices and meaningful looks. A woman in her late 20s wearing a dusty pink coat and clutching a press pass approached Jasmine. I just want to say thank you, she said. My mom's a teacher and has faced exactly what you talked about. You said it better than anyone I've ever heard. Jasmine gently placed a hand on her shoulder. Tell your mom she's not alone. Nearby, a tall man in a navy suit waited his turn, trying to stay casual. I work for a state senator in Minnesota, he said. You should know. We'll be quoting you tomorrow. Jasmine gave a faint smile, but stayed quiet. No words needed. Then a college student, maybe 20 or younger, leaned in, his voice cracking slightly. I'm pre-law. Everyone tells me I need to go to Yale or it doesn't count. I was starting to believe that. You just changed something for me. That hit Jasmine differently, not because it surprised her, but because it didn't. She met his eyes. It counts when you show up and prove why you belong. A school name can't do that. Only you can. He nodded firmly, hands shaking Meanwhile, Karoline stood across the room, surrounded by 2 aides and an older man who looked like a donor. They huddled in quiet conversation, avoiding eye contact with anyone outside their circle. It wasn't hostility, just discomfort, the kind that hits when someone unexpected wins the moment anyway. Eventually, the panelists were led to a private lounge to debrief. Jasmine sat alone on a couch for a moment before the professor from Morgan joined her, sitting nearby but not too close. "Your poise tonight. It wasn't just impressive, it was rare," he said. She met his gaze, not with pride but with clear resolve. "I've had to practice it more than you know." He nodded. Across the room, the moderator entered, scrolling through his phone. "We're already trending," he said. "Your lines are all over Twitter, especially the one about being underestimated." Jasmine shrugged. "That's not new." He chuckled, unsure if she was joking. A producer came over, coat in hand. "Car's ready when you are." Jasmine stood slowly, gathered her notes, and nodded to the few people left. She wasn't gloating or riding the high. She was tired but not defeated, just worn from carrying. The weight of staying composed under fire and still standing strong. But the night wasn't over. The quiet ride back to the hotel, the solitude, and the thoughts that would linger once the applause faded remained ahead. The ride back to the hotel was quiet. Jasmine sat in the back of a black SUV, her blazer folded neatly on her lap. The driver didn't speak, just played soft jazz on the radio, the kind of music that blends into the background and never demands attention. She stared out the window at the grid of Des Moines streets, neon signs from closed restaurants reflecting off the glass. A group of teenagers passed a corner gas station, laughing with their jackets pulled tight against the cold. Jasmine wasn't replaying her performance. She was thinking about her mother. Years ago, her mom had come home late from a night shift at the hospital, still in scrubs, and found Jasmine asleep at the kitchen table, face buried in a history book, pen still in hand. Instead of waking her, her mom sat beside her and gently rested a hand on her back. Jasmine didn't hear her mother say it then, but she'd remember later. "She works harder than anyone sees." That's what tonight felt like. A quiet echo of all the moments that shaped her. Every time she'd walked into rooms where her presence raised eyebrows before she spoke. All the little digs disguised as jokes, the lowered expectations dressed as concern. She hadn't planned to give a speech or take a shot. She had only planned to tell the truth, and when Karoline gave her that opening, Jasmine took it. She glanced at her phone, dozens of missed texts from her team, her brothers, even some old classmates. Most were screenshots, links, clips. One message stood out from Miles. "They tried it, you handled it. Proud of you." She smiled as the car pulled up in front of the hotel. The valet quickly opened the door, and Jasmine stepped out slowly, stretching her legs. Her heels clicked on the concrete as she walked into the lobby. A few heads turned. A man at the bar gave her a polite nod, clearly recognizing her from the show. She headed straight for the elevator, pressed the button, and waited. Just as the doors began to close, a soft voice called out, "Hold it." Jasmine stuck out her hand and a woman slipped in just in time. Mid-50s, warm brown eyes, a long scarf wrapped twice around her neck. "I saw you on TV just now," the woman said. "You were—" "Ooh, that was something." Jasmine smiled modestly. "Appreciate it." "No, really," the woman continued, her tone softening. "My daughter's in law school. She watches these panels, trying to find someone to model herself after. She called me after your segment crying. She said, 'Mama, I needed that. I needed to see that. So, thank you.'" Jasmine didn't know what to say. There were words for policy, for press, for interviews, but none for this moment. But this moment wasn't about applause. It was about telling her to keep going, Jasmine said finally, even when others try to make her feel small, especially then. The elevator dinged, and Jasmine stepped off on her floor, feeling heavier but somehow fuller than when she left the studio. Inside her room, she didn't turn on the TV or scroll through her phone. She sat on the edge of the bed, slipped off her shoes, and simply sat in silence. Not the heavy kind, but the kind earned through hard truth. There was no dramatic music or sudden victory, just the quiet reality of the truth she had spoken where it mattered, and people had heard her. What stayed with her most wasn't the applause, but the look on that young woman's face, the student in the crowd, the mother in the elevator. They were why Jasmine showed up in the first place. 2 days later, Jasmine sat barefoot in her Dallas kitchen, hair tied up, a warm mug of tea cradled between her hands. The headlines had started to fade, replaced by new clips flooding the internet, but her inbox was still full. Dozens of emails poured in from teachers, law students, parents, strangers. Some shared their own stories of being dismissed. Others simply wrote 2 words, "Thank you." Jasmine couldn't reply to every message, but she read them all. She hadn't meant to become a symbol. She'd just spoken the truth. But when truth is said plainly and confidently, it can silence the noise around it. That's what had happened on that stage. It wasn't just about Karoline's insult. It was about how many people had been quietly waiting for someone like Jasmine to speak up. Because it's not always the insult itself that leaves a mark. It's how the room reacts. The quick laughter, the lowered eyes, the silence that wraps around the moment like plastic. You feel it more than you hear it. And if you're the one being underestimated, you don't just remember it, you carry it. What Jasmine did wasn't just a comeback, it was a correction. More importantly, it was a mirror. She shared her story, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. You don't have to come from where they expect you to matter, speak their way to be heard, or wear their credentials to be respected. But respect isn't always given. You sometimes have to stand in the middle of the room and earn it out loud. Jasmine remembered a law professor telling her once that no matter how brilliant you are, some people will always start you at 0. She hadn't fully believed it then, but life had shown her the truth. So when Karoline's cutting comment came, casual, sharp, calculated, it wasn't just a jab at Jasmine's resume. It was a message to everyone watching who didn't fit the mold. Everyone who had to prove they belonged before they even walked in. And Jasmine responded, not with shouting or tearing others down, but by speaking the truth in a way that couldn't be twisted or dismissed. By the end of the panel, Karoline's words faded into the background. What lingered was how Jasmine sat calm, spoke clearly, and claimed every bit of space she had earned. That mattered, to the student alone in her dorm, wondering if she had what it takes to keep going. To the teacher flipping through lesson plans, tired of being undervalued. To the kid who'd never seen someone who looked like them shut down an insult with grace. That moment didn't go viral because it was flashy. It went viral because it was real. In a world where noise often wins, clarity is a rare kind of courage. But moments pass, headlines fade, and the question becomes, what now? It's easy to cheer when someone says what you're too scared or tired to say. It's harder to be the one at the table when the moment demands it. Jasmine didn't walk into that panel looking to be anyone's hero. She just came prepared. And that was enough, because preparation is power. So is presence. So is knowing who you are when someone tries to shrink you into a stereotype or dismiss your worth with a smile. The truth is, there are thousands of Jasmines out there, women who graduated top of their class but still asked if they were truly qualified, men who landed the job but were told to keep proving themselves, students told their schools weren't good enough, their names too unknown, their credentials too ordinary to be taken seriously. What Jasmine reminded everyone that night was this: where you come from doesn't define what you know, and where you went to school doesn't limit what you're capable of. Respect doesn't belong to the loudest voice in the room. It belongs to the person who stays grounded while being challenged. There was no viral gimmick or media coaching behind her words, just lived experience, clear thinking, and a refusal to let anyone else decide her worth. That's not something you can rehearse. That's something you carry. And if there's a lesson here, if there's one thing to hold on to after the applause fades and the clip ends, it's this: you don't have to shrink yourself to be heard. You don't have to match someone else's volume to make a point. And you definitely don't have to come from privilege to speak with authority. You just need to stand firm in your truth. Let the world say what it wants. Let them laugh, question, smirk. Because when your presence is rooted in preparation and your voice comes from real experience, no jab can throw you off balance. Jasmine didn't win by fighting. She won by standing strong. And someone watching needed to see that. If this story moved you or reminded you of someone you know, share it. Send it to someone wondering if they belong where they are. And if you want more stories like this, where real moments meet real meaning, subscribe to the channel. There's more to come.